Well, this morning we continue on our readings in the book of Luke, liturgical year C. And this morning I'm reading from Luke chapter 5, verses 1 through 11. Let's listen to the words of Luke. One day, while Jesus was standing beside Lake Galilee, many people were pressing all around him to hear the word of God. Jesus saw two boats at the shore of the lake. The fishermen had left them and were washing their nets. Jesus got into one of the boats, the one that belonged to Simon, and asked him to push off a little from the land. Then Jesus sat down and continued to teach people from the boat. When Jesus had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Take the boat into deep water and put your nets in the water to catch fish." Simon answered, "Master, we've worked hard all night trying to catch fish, and we caught nothing. But you say to put the nets in the water, so I will." When the fishermen did as Jesus told them, they caught so many fish that their nets began to break. They called to their partners in the other boat to come help them. They came and filled both boats so full that they were almost sinking. When Simon Peter saw what had happened, he bowed down before Jesus and said, "Go away from me, Lord. I'm a sinful man." He and the other fishermen were amazed at how many fish they caught, as were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, Simon's partners. Jesus said to Simon, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you will fish for people." When the men brought their boats to the shore, they left everything and followed Jesus. This is the word of the Lord.
Push the boat out further to the deep water. Then you and your partners let down your nets for a catch.
Oh, Master, we worked hard all night long and caught nothing. But if you say so, I'll let down the nets. James! John!
Get your boat over and give us some help! Hurry!
On the far end of the net. That's enough. That's
Go away from me, Lord. I am a sinful man.
Don't be afraid. From now on, you'll be catching men.
I had to give you the visual on that bringing in of the fish. It makes a difference, doesn't it, when you can visualize. And I don't know whether you caught it, but did anybody see Jesus' face during this operation? He was just smiling, enjoying the moment, and he even got in the middle and tried to help them do that. You could just see pure joy on Jesus' face when he realized that they were also astonished and overjoyed. My friends, my dad was a very quiet, and at least in my opinion, patient man. Two qualities that are very helpful if you're going to be a fisherman, or a fisher girl in my case. It was my dad who taught me to fish when I was about 8 years old. I remember my brother came up one night from the lake, and he had a bucket. And in the bucket, I could hear the splashing and the sloshing around. And he set the bucket down, and it was about dusk. It was still light. And he took his hands, and he went in the bucket, and he held up 2 of the largest pike I have ever seen in an 8-year-old's eyes. Well, I was hooked. We still have a picture of him, of course. My brother was quite a bit older than I, so he was 18, just graduated from high school, and I was still a pimp squeak. And he was the proudest looking young man I've ever seen, smiling, holding the fish that were like, and he's holding them by the gills. We still have that picture. I wanted to fish like that. My brother, being older brothers, said, "Yeah, right," and walked away when I expressed my desire to learn from him. That's what older brothers do sometimes, That was that. End of discussion. Well, not deterred, I got my trusty yellow and green fishing pole, complete with the green reel. I went inside, opened the bread box, took out my trusty bait, went down to the dock, sat down on the dock, baited my own hook with a little mound of squishy bread, tossed it out there. I waited, and I waited for that bobber to go down. Well, whoo! And I lost the bread. So after several attempts of trying to feed the fish with bread, I might as well have thrown it in the lake. I reeled it in just as the sun was setting and the mosquitoes were attacking. Dejected, depressed, I remember trudging up our hill to the cabin, and I sat in the house wondering what I had done wrong. It's at that point this morning we meet Jesus on the shore, talking to Simon and the others, and you knew the story well before we read it. Simon is reluctant to go back out in the boat because he'd been fishing all night with his brothers. They caught absolutely nothing, and he wanted to get out of the boat and at least sit down and get something to eat. Well, Jesus tells Simon to try again. Go back out. After fishing all night, Simon, try again. Now, I think we know some people in our lives who love to fish and who a lot of the time come home empty-handed. There might even be some of you guys who don't bring in a catch every time you go, but isn't there an attraction about just going out there and just trying? Do you ever wonder why some people don't catch fish? Simon and crew came up empty. Jesus told Simon this: "Let's leave the shallows and go to the deep water." Well, most everybody knows that schools of fish are in deep water. They're not close to the shore. And don't you know people, and it might be yourself, that have your secret fishing holes? And fishermen and women are some of the most tight-lipped people I've ever seen. If you go out on the lake, and we're on Big Island Lake, out at the lakes, and you would go by, I would see my dad go, "Are you catching anything?" "Nah." And so we'd go to another spot. And little me would kind of turn around, and I would see them reeling something in. They didn't want to give up the spot. They were trying to get rid of us, you see. So there's a lot that goes on when you fish. The first rule of fishing is you've got to go where the fish are. That makes sense. Maybe Jesus had a secret fishing hole they didn't know about. But Jesus wasn't talking fish here, was he? He was teaching a spiritual principle this morning. Most commonly, this text that I read from Luke 5 is about creating disciples and about saying, as I read in the text, Lord, I'll go wherever you want me to go. And Jesus says later in the text that Simon won't be catching fish really anymore. He will be catching people. So traditionally, this passage is preached as a recruitment of the disciple strategy. Well, I think you know that part of the story. So this morning, I want to look at why people aren't able to catch fish or to catch people. We could substitute fish for abundance of wisdom or love or peace, couldn't we? Why aren't we able to catch or be or find more wisdom, more love, more peace? All those things we want in abundance. That's your abundance. Some people don't catch these things, first of all, if we look at that text, because they don't want to go out in the deep water. Deep water is where the increase is. Deep water takes faith, doesn't it? You have to believe that if I go deeper, according to everything I've learned about fishing, I have a better chance of catching fish. Deep water, friends, is a risk. It takes focus of mind and heart, concentration and desire. Whoa, there's some big terms. Mind and heart, focus on your task, concentrate on what you need to do to catch, and then wait for it to happen. Now, visibility in that deep black water that you know here is almost next to nothing. You can't really see when you're out in the deep what's really down there. You've got to trust the words and the directions, perhaps of others that have been there before you, who have passed through that deep water and came up with a catch. If we translate that to our own lives, it's no wonder that we all aren't great fisher people. You know, Jesus is always inviting people to go to the deeper end of things, to the deeper end of the issue that seems to be nagging on your heart, that you need to resolve in order to catch the abundance of His peace. Yeah? Now, I know, God, I know that I should be able to and willing to run out and risk for you to stop by the side of the road when you see a young person with the car that's broken down in this weather, and not drive by and say to yourself, I know somebody will help them, Lord. Please send somebody. That's staying in the shallow water, gang, right? It's safe in the shallow water. It's no risk in the shallow water. Even if all of those thoughts run through your head about, well, I know it's not safe and I'm single and I shouldn't, and, be careful. It didn't look like an axe murderer, Lord, but you never know. That's going through your mind, and you're rationalizing why you don't want to step out in the deep water and that somebody else will be there to pick it up. Shallow water is pleasant and safe. Minnows and half-grown fish gather there. You can look down in the shallows. You ever do that? I mean, I could see some pretty decent-sized perch in my day when I would stand there with my little feet, and the minnows would gather around, and then their big buddies would come in, And there was some good half-sizers, and I went, oh, I don't have my pole. They came to me. I didn't go to them. Staying shallow is such a temptation for us today, isn't it? Shallow water doesn't take a lot of courage. But Simon knew that minnows couldn't feed him. Ooh, there it is. Simon knew staying in the shallow and throwing the net would not provide for his family, would not even fill his own stomach. The deep water of faith is where those things we say we want are just swimming around. God, I want more of your peace. Well, you got to go deeper into your own heart and find out why you don't have it. You see, fishing is work too. Even though God provided the so-called miracle at the end of this story, those fellas had to agree to do the work, didn't they? They had to agree to get out there again, even if they thought it was hopeless. Ever been there? Kind of thinking, I can't try again. How many times have I tried to talk to this person, my daughter, my son, my grandchildren, and try to help them see something that you already have learned? And you've tried, and finally you say, Lord, I know you've got this, but I'm not going to try anymore. I give it to you. Now, there is a time and a place for that. Sitting in the boat without any fish in your net is not that place. What's called for in that situation is for you, with God's help and a belief that you are going to catch something, to try again. The shallow is where we begin the adventure, not where we finish it. I love that analogy. The shallow water is where you get your feet wet and you begin to extend the love of Jesus, the peace of God, all of those things that we are told we need to do for the rest of the world. It's easier to do those things when you feel safe and secure in the shallows and you know you're going to get dinner anyway, no matter what happens. But that's not where God's calling you. God's calling you to take some steps and get out when you're beyond your skill set. Isn't that scary? You know it is. You've all been there. Whether it's been in a health situation, whether that's been in a family argument situation, whether that's been in a job situation, you know, the situation where in your head and your heart, you know the solution to the problem at work, but it's not in your pay grade necessarily, and you know that it's not welcome. That's deep water right there, isn't it? You know, what is it easier to do? Keep your mouth shut and let the boss figure it out for themselves, right? Jesus is saying, that's the shallow water. And I'm calling you to use your gifts. So step out there and risk whatever is going to be said to you by whomever and offer the solution. That's fishing and catching. Well, some people don't catch fish because they're afraid to go out in the deep water and risk, and some people don't catch fish because they don't expect to catch any. There it is. They don't expect to catch any. There's Simon. When Jesus tells Simon, let's go to the deep water, he doesn't stop there. Do you hear what else he said? He said, prepare for a catch. Go out in the deep water and let your nets down and prepare for a catch. How many times do we try again and enter the situation, and before you get into the situation, before you open your mouth, what's your brain telling you? Well, this is pretty hopeless. This is not going to happen. So you have to change your expectation. Once you believe and once you're willing to risk, you got to go one step farther out there and say, not only am I willing to risk, God, but I believe that you're going to do something when I'm out there. Now that's still risky, but that will help you catch what you need to catch. You have to have a positive attitude of expectation for God to do what He has promised you. And I know that's kind of tough. Jesus, by saying, put your net down and prepare for a catch, is encouraging them. Expectation, friends, is a part of faith. Faith is not by itself, I believe in God the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. We say those words. I know that we believe those words. I believe them. But that's not the whole 9 yards. Along with the believing, after you confess what you believe, you have to expect that God will return to you what He has promised. And a lot of us don't do that. We profess and say we believe, and we do, and then we go on with our lives, and what happens? You try to manage it yourself, don't you? That's my favorite one. I do that. It's like, okay, God, I believe you, and I know you have the power to help me in this situation, so I believe and I expect that you'll fix it. Amen. There it is. Amen. And then you walk to the car and you're like, okay, now what can I do? I got to call this person. I got it. Maybe this person will help me out. Maybe that person will help me out. Well, maybe I should call so-and-so. What did you just pray? I believe you are who you say you are. I believe that you can do anything. And so I am going to expect that you are going to resolve this situation. Note, you don't pray, resolve this situation so that I can live a life of luxury. It's resolve the situation in your will, and I will still survive. So part of faith, gang, is not just professing, but expecting that you will pursue and you will endure, and yes, eventually you'll climb out of that valley and you will experience the mountaintop. Take a minute for me, and think of a situation recently where you couldn't help yourself, but you were smiling, something was happening inside, and you were just, wow, God, that was nice. Not amazing, but nice. Thanks for that. You know, He does those things all day long. We miss most of them. And eventually, we wake up and catch a few of those things. And I know you all can think of those things. I wish that you would think of those things a little more. Because what happens to fishermen who come up empty? They carry that back with them. They put the boat away, they get out of the boat, and they go home. And they are thinking about the loss and have no idea where the blessing was during the day. That all gets washed away. If you would just take a little time, even at the end of a horrific day, whether that's sitting in a doctor's waiting room for hours, I think everybody here can raise their hand on that situation, wherever it is, and instead of while you're sitting there thinking, oh boy, okay, I wonder now, I got to remember to ask him this, blah, 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 all of that you go through, take a minute to go, when's the last time, God, you really showed me who you were? You actually delivered a promise that I wasn't even expecting. Think about that for 3 minutes. I guarantee you'll walk into that office with a different attitude because you've caught what you needed to catch from your God, you see. I believe that that's what the story's about this morning. Jesus keeps pushing Simon's boundaries, doesn't he? Leave the shore, Simon. Go to the deep, Simon. Trust me, Simon. Risk being disappointed, Simon. Well, you saw from the video, I thought that was a really good moment, that Simon took the risk. We don't know what was in his head. He might have been thinking the same thing I would have thought. Lord, just really, we're dead tired. We have spent all stinking night out there in that boat and got nothing. Can't you cut me a break, God? Because we just want to go home and get something to eat and get ready and try again tonight. So Simon, he did take the risk. He put up with the complaints of his brothers and his friends, grumbling. Can you hear him grumbling? We got to go back. Simon, what are you thinking? We just came in. We're tired. You know that he got all that kind of stuff from his friends. And on top of that, I thought of this last night. These professional fishermen were taking advice from a carpenter. Jesus wasn't a fisherman. He was a carpenter. He was trained as a carpenter. So can you imagine that? And there was a crowd of people on the shore. They knew who he was. This was the carpenter boy from Nazareth. And he's getting in the boat and telling the professional fishermen to turn around and go back out in the middle of the morning. Yeah, okay. Casting their nets where they hadn't tossed it before, the others were silently thinking, futile, what a waste of time. Oh my goodness, are you kidding me? Simon, just get a grip on yourself, boy. But with some kind of unspeakable faith, this man trusted. And whoa, what a catch. Fish jumping, fish flopping in the boat, disciples being amazed, laughing, smiling, jumping in, everyone being filled with joy. Oh Lord, what a morning. And Simon then knew how he did it. And we saw on the screen that long moment of silence, which is where you divine most of your wisdom in this world, by the way. It's not from flapping and yelling and being joy. You define wisdom for yourself. It enters your spirit in the quiet moments. They looked eye to eye for a long time. And during that spiritual moment of silence between two big men in a boat with the entourage behind them, they made a spiritual connection. And Simon knew that moment that he was the Messiah, the Lord, the God that was promised them. And he said, Lord, get away from me. Lord, get away from me. I'm a sinful man. I can't help you. I can't even be in your presence. At that moment, Simon's faith took over. His belief was launched. And when they got out of the boat that day, yes, indeed, they left everything behind them. And they became believing disciples of Jesus Christ. Friends, this week I need you to get out of the boat. I need you to get out of the boat, and I need you to get back in the boat, and I need you to push off and go out in the deep. I don't care how deep. It can be medium deep. It can be very deep. Just get out there and expect that God is going to give you abundance of whatever it is you are desperately needing this morning. It can be peace. It can be wisdom. It can be love. It can be strength. It can be courage. Those are your fish. So just get out there and put down your net. And expect that sometime this week, God will deliver something to you that you have indeed believed in and expected. In Jesus Christ, your Savior's name, amen.